The BBC has apologised for describing the Reform Party, Reform UK, as far-right in an online article.
Yes, well, released just a few days after Lee Anderson defected to the party, Reform leader Richard Tice has called the description defamatory and also libellous.
Well, we're delighted to say that the Reform UK leader Richard Tice joins us now in the studio. And Richard, this was shocking.
It was shocking, to say the least. We woke up to it on Sunday morning. It appeared on Saturday evening, and it clearly failed all of the editorial standards. There are very significant implications of calling a political party, and by implication, its leader and senior leadership team, far right. And it is that which is defamatory and libellous. That's why they've apologised immediately, and they will change their editorial guidelines, because if they can get away with that, then all of a sudden everybody else does. They will take that as a sort of sign of credibility, and it has huge implications. That would mean, for example, we might lose our bank accounts, we might lose the ability to get a mortgage, bank loans for our businesses. All of this flows immediately from that description, and it's patently outrageous. And there are we're waiting for Associated Newspaper Group, owners of the Mail Online and the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, also to apologise, because they've made the same thing over the weekend, as well as other comments that I believe are very defamatory on Sunday in the Mail on Sunday. With regard to our policy, saying that I'm campaigning against race, which is complete nonsense. I'm campaigning on immigration policy. I'm not campaigning against race, so my lawyers are expecting to hear back from them with confirmation of their apology, and another news group as well. So this is really significant. Look, politics is a dirty game, but we can play sensible dirty as opposed to defamatory dirty, in which case it goes to a whole different sphere. And that's where it's at the moment.
And in your mind, what does far-right mean? If a party is labelled as far-right by the BBC or any other newspaper, what does that mean? If
you actually look in various dictionaries and things, that refers to fascist, neo-Nazi implications, and that is very significant. And so clearly we're a country mile from that. Interestingly, we've got some of our policies that are to the left of Keir Starmer, for example, with regard to public ownership of utilities and monopolies such as water companies. So, it's about being sensible on this, and, we're just not going to tolerate that sort of completely false defamatory label, and that's just not where, UK politics is. Yes, we're doing well in the polls, we're going up in the polls. I accept that means more people are going to focus on us and give us a hard time. That's fine. We can have a respectful hard time as opposed to something that goes way beyond the line.
It's interesting. I suppose there is an argument that this was done out of ignorance rather than malice. There's an argument that people would just sort of type out that word thinking, because far left doesn't really have the same sort of connotations that far right does. And you might just think on a sliding scale it's a reasonable thing to do. But as you say, saying far right carries all of those deeper, evil, genocidal...
But you had the Prime Minister in his speech in front of Downing Street a couple of weeks ago. He referred to the Islamic extremists, think on the far left, but also he was referring very significantly to the far right. So you can see those connotations, and it is... they are both very serious, extreme positions.
It implies violence.
It implies violence. It is very serious, and editors and journalists need to think very carefully about using it.
Do you think if this got past the BBC, and you also mentioned the Daily Mail, that perhaps your party has a bit of a PR problem, that one would even consider calling it far-right? Clearly, there are people in this country who view the party as far-right.
Or is it actually people with vested interests who are trying to defend the indefensible? For example, I don't know. As I say, there are serious connotations about that specific term, and they need to be aware of that. And if they would say, well, so what, we're going to use it, fine, then, you'll deal with my lawyers. It's as simple as that. But I think we can play politics in a more sensible, focused debate around what are actually the right policy solutions to the massive challenges the country's got. We've got our contract out on the website, people are looking at it, and we've got some serious solutions out there. And that's what we want to be focusing on, as opposed to, frankly, defamatory slogans and labels that I think just takes it to a ridiculous place.
You do see far-right absolutely everywhere. You see people calling Conservative politicians far-right. You see people calling broadcasters far right. Sometimes it does seem to be used for anyone who's centre right.
There's a difference between an individual using it in the sort of the banter in the pub, as opposed to a serious global news organisation, respected news organisation, using it, because that then gives licence to everybody else to use it. Well, they said it, the BBC said it.
Oh, and then it can
or the Daily Mail said
all
it.
over the place.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the difference.
But I wonder, now that you have a Member of Parliament, now that you will be under a greater deal of scrutiny than you have perhaps before been in your history, polling at third place nationally in multiple polls now. Are you prepared for the onslaught that will come there? Because there will be lots of policies that you put forward that might, in a 30-second soundbite, sound reasonable or not, or pass the whatever test. But for example, this one-in, one-out policy on migration. How on earth would that work in practice? How do you go from 700,000 in a year down to zero?
No, actually, it's not, you see. You're going from 1.3 million to a year to about 400 to 450,000. It's very simple, because that's where we used to be, Tom. The numbers have increased so dramatically, but actually we just need to take it back to where it was. And about 400,000 leave every year. So you can welcome the same number in what we call smart immigration, where you've genuinely got skill shortages, where the average salary is, for example, above the average national salary. That way, you're getting the best of all worlds.
We have the fluctuations in these numbers. We don't count people out. We only count people in. We only.
But that's not. Look, two wrongs don't make a right. Just because you've been utterly woefully incompetent before doesn't mean you can't improve things.
You recognise that this is not. You're not going to be able to do this overnight. You're going to have to build infrastructure. You're going to have to completely change the way that migration in this country works.
You've just got to use the existing infrastructure we've got. We've got the infrastructure. We've had the infrastructure. We used to count people out. Then we stopped. We've got the infrastructure to count people in. You can do all this stuff.
About billions of pounds.
No, you're not.
E-gates.
Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense, Tom. Look, the reality is, just because something doesn't work at the moment doesn't mean it can't be improved. And your question about the scrutiny, of course, we want the scrutiny. I want the Labour Party to challenge our health policies, because our health policies are the only ones with the ambition of getting to zero waiting lists in 2 years. They're not coming after us because they haven't got that ambition, they haven't got the solutions, they're not prepared to use the independent healthcare sector, and we've allocated how we would actually fund it.
So they would use more independent healthcare,
but nothing like the quantity that we would. And so we put it out there, how we would actually allocate a whole bunch more funding, how we can save the money. So this is all. Look, I welcome the scrutiny, because that means actually we're being taken seriously. We're right at the centre of the debate. We've got the answers. If people think they've got a better answer, bring it on. Let's have a head-to-head debate.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Reform UK leader Richard Tice there. Thank you very much.